Hey, everybody. Thank you for those of you that have taken the time to join us this weekend for 1455's fourth annual SummerFest. I can tell you it's a labor of love, and this hard work would be very unrewarding if we weren't able to share it with people. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here and being a part of this. You can find out a lot more about what we do at 1455litarts.org. I'm Sean Murphy. I'm the founding director of 1455. And as always, I like to be brief because I like to drive people to the website to see what we do. But really, we're a nonprofit arts organization, and we are around to celebrate storytelling. And that, of course, entails our writers, but it increasingly involves photographers and music and dance and illustration and all of that. My joy is to expose people to all these stories, and that's what this festival is all about. So, part of the festival each year is identifying a keynote speaker, which can be a hard task for someone like myself. I'm happy to say that this year it was very easy. What we do is we look for a noteworthy individual who has not only demonstrated the best aspects of storytelling and can serve as an example to anyone, whether it's a veteran or a newbie, but someone that's also elevated the game for others within the arts world. And I have to say, this year was easy. I have known and admired Jenna Blum for almost 2 full decades, which means we're almost in our 30s. She has never ceased to enlighten and inspire me. She is a legit rock star, which you'll hear as I read her bio in a moment. Her achievements as a writer speak quite eloquently for themselves, but arguably, it's her work celebrating and promoting storytellers and the art of storytelling that make her such an obvious fit for this humble but very genuine and enthusiastically given honor. Plus, it's typical of her grace and generosity that she's willing to accept this honor, being awarded virtually because we roll with the times we live in. Let me read her bio so you can see what we're dealing with here. And if you are new to the Jenna Blum experience, I envy you because you're about to fall in love with another writer. So, Jenna Blum is the New York Times and internationally best-selling author of the novels Those Who Save Us, The Storm Chasers, The Lost Family, the novella The Lucky One, which is in the collection Grand Central, and the memoir Woodrow on the Beach, which was our February event, which you can find on our YouTube page, where Jenna and I went deep on that amazing memoir that you should put at the top of your list. She's been one of Oprah's top 30 women writers with her work published in over 20 countries. She is the co-founder, CEO of the literary social media marketing company, A Mighty Blaze. She's based in Boston, teaches at Grub Street Writers, where she's been running master fiction and novel workshops for over 20 years. She's active online, and you should follow her on all the platforms. Jenna Blum, my friend, it's such a joy, as always, to see you and talk to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I always love talking to you, brother, and thank you for everybody who is attending 1455 this year.
Well, let's get right into it. Look, as I said, there's many reasons that you'd be an ideal candidate to be our designated keynote speaker. Your unbelievable body of work, your literary advocacy, especially the recent co-founding of A Mighty Blaze, which I want you to talk about. But as I've told you before, and I'm happy to repeat, to me, you epitomize what I would consider the ideal modern literary citizen. You do the work, you embrace the sensibility, which the good, the bad, and the ugly of us creative types, but you care deeply about spreading the love, and you make space for other worthy voices. So to me, you are in a lot of regards a hero.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel the same way. We both know that it's so fulfilling to build a community like 1455 or like the Blaze or the people I've been privileged to teach among for many years at Grub Street Writers. And it also is a way of self-sustaining, I think, to be involved with so many wonderful people. And it can be tough, like you as sort of the titular head of an organization and as the actual head are probably working 16-hour days, and many of them like after midnight and like in your underwear, and at least that would be me. It's not that glam, but it is incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, well, so talk a little bit, brag a little bit about A Mighty Blaze for those that don't know, because it would be a great story anytime, but I love the origin story, and I love the way that the Blaze has continued to blaze. So just talk a little bit about the impetus behind creating this unbelievable platform.
Thank you. I'm happy to brag on the Blaze because it really is not just me, it's a community of people. So during the first week of the pandemic in March 2020, I'm sure you all share the experience of remembering how things shut down so quickly. And for authors, many of us, myself included, watched our events being shut down maybe in like one day. There was one day I was sitting in my apartment and I saw these emails come in, like the board at Penn Station, the train schedule board, where it was like cancel, 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 cancel. And I got maybe like 9 or 10 cancellations in one afternoon. And I was at the tail end of a book tour then for my third novel, The Lost Family. So I had had the privilege of being out on the road, meeting readers, talking about the book, trying to gin up the sales and the enthusiasm for about a year and a half with that book already. But many of my friends who are authors were watching their brand new babies' chances go down the drain and watching their tours get extinguished. And that's so important for a book. And I thought, I just cannot sit here and watch this happen to people who have labored for a year, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years in some cases over debut novels or debut nonfiction just to watch those get extinguished. Yes. So I called my friend Caroline Leavitt, who is a New York Times bestselling novelist and book reviewer, and she had started something. Caroline's like a heart on legs, basically. She had started the same week something called the Nothing is Canceled virtual blog tour and was inviting writers to send videos to her so that she could feature them on her blog about their new books. And I said, Caroline, I feel like we're living in like 1943 England, and Churchill is saying the lights are going out all over Europe and they will not be lit again in our lifetimes. But each book is like a little flame of hope in this, this dark world. And maybe if we put all the flames together every Tuesday when books come out, we can make a mighty blaze. So I'll throw up some social media pages. We can invite all the authors to come and feature their works every Tuesday. And in that first week, it was like we were on the only rowboat leaving the Titanic. Like every author in the whole world was like, please put me on the Blaze, please put me on the Blaze. And it just grew and grew and grew. And now we have 9 regular author interview shows. We have a podcast, we have a newsletter, we have a website, mightyblaze.com. And we feature writers from every genre, from debuts to, the literary legends like John Irving and Anna Quindlen and Edwiga Danticat, where I get to interview Maggie O'Farrell this September. So it has been going on for 2.5 years that we've been interviewing authors from like debuts to frontliners to thrillers to cookbook authors to, we have an interview going on right now for chick lit. So if you're interested at all in any author ever, check out The Blaze.
Yeah, check out The Blaze. It's unbelievably professionally run. It's unbelievably supported by the community. And I think that gets at the heart of what you and I are talking about. When we talk about community, it's for the community, by the community. But I think as cutesy, albeit true as that is, the downside of that I think a lot of people don't appreciate is when it's by the community, for the community, there's an authenticity and integrity, but it also means that a lot of people have to work really hard. So while I want to celebrate the unbelievable work you've done and continue to do in your team to lift up all the writers, because we all benefit from that, I'd like to talk a little bit about advocacy and what that means, because I'll just say I get comments a lot, which are intended as compliments, and I receive them as such. But people say things like, it's amazing what you're doing, or it's amazing that, you're putting the time in. And it's like, yeah, but if we had more people willing to do that, not only would the literary community benefit, but I bet a lot of these people who describe the writing life as a drudgery and a lonely experience would find a whole different type of joy.
I don't experience the writing life as lonely anymore. And I think that was a silver lining gift of the pandemic, that before that, and for many years, like for decades, actually, I decided that I was sort of a professional misanthrope. And that one of the reasons that I was a writer is that I was like super introverted and like being with my imaginary people better than I like being in the real world. And that idea of myself started to erode when I was on book tour, talking about my first books and being invited to book clubs. And I realized that I would be invited into people's homes or speaking at a function or an event. And I really liked the people I was talking to and was curious about them and found that each person has a story. And so I was starting to question that even before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, I was engaged with this fantastic novel workshop I was teaching for Grub Street writers, which I've taught for over 20 years. The novelists come in as their books demand. Some of them stay in the class for a year, some for 3 years, as long as the books take. So it's a sort of a rolling grandfathered in class. And I had this amazing crew of writers who I called my pirate crew because they're all totally debauched. And that was the group I was working with pre-pandemic. And in that first week of March 2020, I reached out to all of them and said, "Do you guys want to do this thing with me?" And they all did. And so now I have 35 creative professional volunteers working with me on Blaze. And I call them the Blaze fam because they are. I mean, we were together on January 6th on a Zoom and people started looking at their phones and saying, well, what the holy hell is going on now? You know, some of them have had COVID, they have lost people. They've, you know, we sort of held each other's hands the whole time. And now that life is shifting again and we're opening up a little bit, I can't really do without that community. I no longer want to be an isolate as a writer. I love working with other people. And I think a rising tide lifts all boats. We lift each other up when we communicate and when we find ways to work together to lift up our individual projects and each other.
Yeah, beautifully stated, Jenna. And I think, yeah, kind of what I'm getting at, and you and I have talked about in the past, is this notion of what do you mean by community? And of course, that means a whole bunch of things. It can be the micro communities that exist within genres or the friendships that bring some of these things to bear. But what I've noted in the last year, right, as we kind of adopted to virtual by any means necessary and bringing the art, connecting any way we could, I'm seeing this less as arts advocacy and a real defiant way to approach an increasingly polarized society where people, even though they live online, feel alone, feel disconnected. This is something that I think the world can learn and copy from the arts community because we've been nimble, and it's a pay it forward gesture where you're doing good, but as I said earlier, I think the individual also finds an unexpected reward by being involved and helping others.
I totally agree. I love that word nimble, by the way. That's why I had this like moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you for using that word. But I think that the arts community was especially quick to pivot, perhaps because a lot of creatives have to pivot in our regular lives anyway. If you are a professional creative, you know that your life is often feast or famine financially, or that it may have sort of ebb and flow tides in terms of like, are you teaching this semester? Are you speaking that semester? Do you have a book project that's coming, due and you're going to get money, or, then you get paid once every 5 or 10 years. So, it really forces you to be agile in terms of what is feeding you in your life and then how you are giving back to other people, and it sort of expands and contracts. And so I think that when the pandemic came along and we said, oh, we couldn't do things in the same way anymore, like here I am talking to you on my screen in my study instead of being behind a podium. But
Right.
we seemed pretty quick to adapt. The individual writers did, and the individual writing communities did. I feel like publishing maybe is a couple of steps behind, but they sort of like always had been, in a sense. They're still the traditionalists. So it's been really interesting to be out in front like you have been, and I have been, sort of like holding up a torch on this path and being like, where are we going? Like, what is happening out here? But I kind of love it. I love the challenge.
And it's funny, Jenna, like there's so much to be circumspect about, right? Sociopolitically, et cetera, right now. But I'm very bullish. I mean, in fact, even just today, Ron Charles, personal hero, Washington Post book columnist, has a piece in his Friday newsletter, which you should check out, everyone, talking about the pains that continue within the literary industry, the ill-paid workers that are doing the lion's share of the work and not having the security or the pay they need. But so despite some very genuine real world challenges, I'm bullish on kind of the future of the arts because of this, what you just articulated, this nimble, agile, and very soulful way of trying to deal with some genuine challenges.
Mm-hmm. There is a Hemingway quote that I just pulled up on my affirmation app the other night. There is no better friend than a book. And I always loved that ever since I was a child. And I was a sort of an outlier child, as I think a lot of writers and creatives are as children. And the books were my solace and my company and my friends. And I used to get my allowance and go to my local bookstore and the Watchung Bookseller in Montclair, New Jersey, which is still there. And I would pick out what book I was going to read that week. And that was my friend for that week. And then I would live with these characters in my head as my companions for that week. Yeah. And I think that one of the great things about the writing community, and the one that you have grown and the one that I'm lucky to participate in as well, is that it taught me that even outside the covers of a book, if you are involved in some sort of writing community, you need never be alone. And we saw this with the pandemic. We often had people write to us behind the scenes on Blaze and say, thank you for doing this. Like, I live by myself. Like, I'm in my living room in like rural Illinois or in Alaska or, wherever people were. And now I get to watch my favorite authors on screen, and thank you for, and I don't feel alone because I have this conduit. And that was the biggest honor. Like, I just gave myself goosebumps. Like, you couldn't pay me enough to bring that into people's lives, because I know what it's like to be alone or to feel alone. Like, all of us do. It's part of the human experience. Ironically, it's a collective aloneness experience. But I live alone. I have a dog, like I am between husbands and didn't choose to have kids so that I could keep writing books. And so if I didn't have that community during the pandemic, God knows what would have happened to me. But the community was accessible, and it was there, and it was eager, and it was enthusiastic. And you can always find community when you look at books, bookstores, online communities, 1455, the Blaze. Like, if you look for a book, you will find community.
If you look in a book, you'll find community. What a great, that's unbelievable. That might be our new tagline. I love that.
Right, it's yours.
So listen, we've talked about the advocacy, which I wanted to, because that is right now what makes you, for me, particularly like just relevant in 2022. But I'd be doing, disservice if we didn't talk a little bit about what drives you as a creator. I met you, like I said, before we were born, because that would mean we're 50s.
Exactly. Yep.
But your first novel hadn't come out. In fact, I was so lucky to read a Word doc version. But
oh my God.
My question is, what continues to motivate you? Like, what has changed and what hasn't changed? I just think I get asked this all the time. People that watch our features, like, they want to know what goes on behind the screen. So talk a little bit about your process and how you've maintained the passion to continue to do the work day in and day out.
It's so interesting. Do you want me to get real about this, or do you want me to give my like actual professional?
I want you to get really real.
Okay, I'm going to get really real with you guys. So I think I reevaluate my passion every day. Like, Sean and I were talking about this a little bit in the green room, because we are friends and have been friends since we were like new souls looking down the chutes into like what, earthly body we were going to assume. And when I was writing my first book, I was cashing in on a passion I've had since I was 4 years old. My dad was a writer. He was a news writer. My earliest memories have the soundtrack of his typewriter. Like, those of you who are also 30 years old remember what a typewriter is. And that's all I ever wanted to be, was a writer like my dad. And I have been so incredibly blessed in my life to have that as my passion and my profession, my avocation. That's what I have been doing. I think that the pandemic has put an inflection point on many writers who suddenly had the chance, as the whole world has. We've had this peculiar intermission to allow us to examine our lives and say, is this in fact still my passion? Is this still something I want to do? Can I afford to keep doing this? Like, the creative arts are not well paid. Right. And it occurred to me recently that I was like, oh, I could have done something else that brought in a regular paycheck, and I am not doing that. And do I want to go find something? Like, I feel like I'm in this sort of second act of my life after the pandemic intermission. Like, do I want to keep doing this? So I feel as though the planet collectively, I hear this from so many people saying, like, we have been given the chance. And I'm very aware that I'm coming from a place of privilege about this. Sure. Yeah. I can choose to say, like, do I want to keep doing this or not? I'm not somebody who has 3 kids and is maybe living out of her car in a Walmart parking lot thinking, like, where's my next meal coming from? But we know as creatives, we're not being paid like hedge fund managers, right? So it's kind of like, what do we want to do? So I reevaluate that passion every day and say, do I want to keep writing? And after a lot of soul searching, and after looking at the Blades, which taught me I love making community, creative community, heading community, I really do want to keep writing. And I bring that sort of gem of information to you after a lot of asking myself in the middle of the night, like, is this something you still want to do? And I think the thing that pushes me to do it, and ask me this again when I get offline with you, I have to actually go back to work and write something. But I feel as though I have an obligation to the people in my head, because I have these people in my head who live there, and I am their chute. Like, I talked about the new souls jumping down the chute into their earthly bodies. Like, I feel like the people in my head are real people, will not jump down into their page forms unless I open up that conduit and I sit my butt down in the chair and I do the work. And it is really uncomfortable to have real ass people in your head who can't get down and meet other people because you're like, no, today I would much rather do X or Y. So that's my passion, really, is giving voice to those people and their stories. And do I get in my own way? Oh my God, so much, obviously. But I think that that is the thing that is going to help me continue to do what I want to do.
Well, I mean, I said at the outset that you're a hero and you inspire me. I think, those of you watching, especially those with less experience or younger, trying to make sense of this, I hope that this is both, a gut check, is ultimately inspiring and consoling. But listen, let me repeat from the bio: New York Times and internationally best-selling author. It's a struggle. There's not a lot of difference between a writer writing at the highest levels and a musician or an athlete. You don't just wave a magic wand and feel the magic juice. It's work. It requires dedication. But what I think comes through with Jenna, and the reason I hold her up as an example, is she keeps it real, and it makes no bones about the fact that it's hard work. It maybe not the most remunerative labor one can do, but the payoff is so spiritually enriching. There's no other life if it's something that you want to pursue, but you do have to put in the time. And I think that that's a lesson that we desperately need to be reminded about. And that gets us back to community and how we find that ability to go on by connecting with our kindred spirits.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a joy at the heart of it. Like the pilot light for all writers is that sort of tiny flame. And sometimes it's really fierce, and sometimes it is like a ghost flame, like all pilot lights. But it's the joy of that is, to me, the joy of it is not sitting down to do the work. I actually hate doing that. Like, I do not like being in the chair. I procrastinate a ton, but once I'm actually into the work and you're creating something out of nothing, like Rumpelstiltskin spinning straw into gold, like you're creating something from thin air. What I do, there are many ways in which I keep myself going. Like, I reward myself by emailing myself every day's work. Like, I try to write a scene a day when I'm working on a project, and I lie in bed at night and do the thing you're not supposed to do, which is look at my phone. And I read what I wrote on my phone. And no matter what shape the thing is, like whether I think it's rotten or whether I think it's acceptable or whether I think, wow, that was surprisingly good, or, that was a miracle, it's a slam dunk, I have created something that did not exist that morning by sitting in my chair and opening the conduit and doing the work. And that is actually really amazing when you think about it. And then to put together a whole project that you then have the enormous privilege of sharing with other people, and those people know you're imaginary people because of this conduit work that you did, and maybe you've made their lives a little bit better because of that, and they feel less alone, or they carry something one of your characters said forever. It gets woven into the fabric of that person. Like, what could be a greater privilege than that? So that's why I keep doing it. And the epaulet of like the New York Times bestseller, the international bestseller, like I can talk about that and how weird that is and how awesome it is and what a gift. But the fact is, at the end of the day, I sit down in my yoga pants or in my, camo skirt or whatever in my chair, and I still have to do the thing every day that is not glamorous, but that is rewarding.
Yeah. Listen, I think one of the reasons I've always connected with you and adore you so much, Jenna, is I do think, if I dare say, we are kindred spirits, in the sense that I think back to something I wrote in a journal, like in my early 20s, and in my, myopic, naive wisdom, I just remember thinking, I want to try to make my life more artistic and bring the art that I experience more, just meld the two so that I don't have to separate creating and savoring and celebrating and making a living. And I think both of us have been on paths where we've been blessed to see the wisdom in not going it alone, not settling for cash, although that's probably a loser's game anyway, but really figuring out that it's almost a responsibility to be a literary citizen, but the rewards are so immense that, everything else would pale in comparison. And you were talking to me in the green room. We were like, what else would we be doing if we couldn't do this?
Yeah, I mean, there are many things. Last night I was watching like couples therapy on Showtime, and I'm like, why am I not a therapist? Like I'm interested in people and human stories and human condition in whatever form. But I do keep returning like a homing pigeon to the writing, and part of it is probably ego. I've been doing this since I was 4, so I have built a career, I built a track record. But I also think that it does offer so many rewards in terms of spinning these stories. Like when you're in it, the magic is really palpable, and then you get to, again, on the flip side, connect with other people because of that thing that you've done. So it really is like a twofold thing. There's like the individual experience of going that deep dive into your own imaginary world and seeing what the muse has for you and like what is there, and mining that and bringing it back out. That is a highly personal, highly almost like a fungible experience. And then on the flip side, like getting to meet people like 2 years later because you did that, like that is a privilege. I should also point out to those of you who are watching this and like wanting to stick forks in your eyes and being like, I have to be bored forever and keep my job as a dishwasher to be able to write books. Like you can always grab the brass ring. And one of the amazing things about this career is it's one of the few that does not stop with age. And in fact, you can do this like when you're 90, you could be like writing books your whole life and then write a book and it can hit the bestseller list when you're 92 years old. And you'd be like, wow, I am suddenly like the taste sensation of the decade. You never know what can happen. And that's another part of the magic of the creative life for me.
I love it, Jenna. And, I think my final thoughts would be, we rightly, are focused on the polarity and the obvious obstacles so many of our brothers and sisters face, and the world is not fair. But one thing that art, aspires to and can reward is if you're able to connect in a meaningful way and do the work, there's a decent chance you're going to find a community that receives these things that used to live in your head. And what better reward for being a human being than to have that experience? That is what separates us from, other species, this ability to transcend time and language, circumstance. And usually it's an uplifting experience.
Mm-hmm. It always has been for me. I've not met any mean writers. I really have not. I mean, that's partly why I live in Boston. We have Grub Street Writers here, which is a sort of life support system for writers in the fantastic community that I used as the base to build The Blaze. And I have to say, in 2.5 years of working with authors and really big name authors and debut authors, like authors of every stripe, of every color, of every denomination, from everywhere in the world, there has not been a single author or writer. I prefer to call it, we're all writers, right? Like there hasn't been a single writer who has been a jerk, like not one. Including John Irving, who was like one of the first people we interviewed and who I had to drink like half a bottle of bourbon before that interview just to be able to introduce him. But yeah, I mean, everybody has been fantastic. So it's just
here. And listen, they say, don't meet your heroes because you're going to be disappointed. I know a hero. I adore a hero. I'm inspired by a hero. Jenna, to be continued, as always, with us. But let me just, say once again, sincere gratitude on behalf of 1455. You inspire us. You inspire so many. And it's our great good fortune to be able to learn from you and hear from you. Just thank you for being the person you are. You may not realize how important you are to so many of us. So I can't wait to see what you're up to next. And as we always say at 1455, once you're in, you're in. So we will see you again, hopefully soon.
I would love that. Thank you so much. And I just am like, I'm well verklempt now. So thank you so much. The story continues, brother. The story continues.
Right on. Well, folks, thank you for being here. And again, if you have not experienced the Jenna Blum experience, start with Woodrow on the Beach, unbelievably moving memoir, and then move your way through. Check out A Mighty Blaze, get involved, figure out ways to connect with other writers, use Jenna as an inspiration. That's why we chose her. That's why we thank her for being here. And we thank you for checking out 1455's 4th annual SummerFest. We will be back. We'll be bigger and better. We've got a lot of stuff on the horizon, but right now we just want to take a moment, remind everyone, stay safe, be well. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your fellow artists. And we will see you on the flip side.
Happy reading and writing.
Thanks to every single person who's joined us these last 3 days for our 4th annual SummerFest. What a thrill. Almost 50 panels over 3 days. all I can say is this remains a labor of love. We hope to be back. We will be looking for continued support from our community. That means you. If you want to find out how to get involved, how to be part of this journey, and how to support us so that we can continue to provide free programs like this 3-day festival, check us out at 1455litarts.org. Get involved, spread the word, and help us. For today, I want to celebrate. I want to thank all of our speakers, everyone who took part in this festival, including everyone who watched it and is being part of our community. A special shout out to our keynote, Jenna Blum, featured artists Kim Triedman and Sekou Andrews. Again, every single speaker and the entire 1455 team. Please visit or revisit our event page, check out the SummerFest committee, people who will be meeting all year, helping put this together. This is a labor of love. It's a tremendous labor, and this would be absolutely impossible without the unbelievable assistance and support and dedication of the entire team. The committee does so many things behind the scenes. I get the privilege of sorts to be here front and center to speak on behalf of the organization. I'm always proud and happy to do so, but every one of them should be standing here with me. Without them, this does not exist. So please give praise to all the great people who made this work. I do want to shout out a handful of people without whose passion and professionalism this really wouldn't happen and wouldn't have happened in the last several years. First and foremost, our creative designer and all-around VIP, Morgan Ryan. She makes us look good all the time, every day, in every way. Her design work, her unbelievable organization and leadership, and her dedication. Without Morgan, I can assure you, we would not be here in the form and fashion that we are. So my absolute gratitude to her, as well as Ben Mayrides, an old friend of mine. As I've been fond of saying, he not only makes the trains run on time, he picks me up at the side of the road. His technical prowess, grace under pressure, and generosity are indescribable and irreplaceable. And Karen Vasquez, our vice chair, is truly the woman behind the scenes. She shuns the spotlight. I would prefer to have her in the spotlight because she's awesome in every way. I'm so proud of her. I'm proud to call her a friend. I'm honored to have her in the mix. And she does a lot of big tasks. She does a lot of unbelievably important tasks, but she does all the dirty work, all the unsung heroics that go on behind the scenes. And I just offer her my ceaseless gratitude and appreciation. Please know that without these folks and every single person on the committee, including Jess, Katie, and Ellie, we would be in much worse shape. So if you've enjoyed what you've seen and you've thought like I have, boy, has this been flawless and amazing. It's all thanks to them. So I'm going to leave with a parting word. I like to err on the side of brevity whenever possible, but I do feel the occasion calls for a few concluding thoughts. There's a familiar nugget of wisdom that anyone who has run a nonprofit has heard and is probably familiar with, which is, if you want advice, ask for money. If you need money, ask for advice. And one piece of advice that I've received directly and quite often, implicitly, and with increasingly resigned overtones since the pandemic began over 2 years ago, is that this is a really bad time to be seeking funding. I have no choice but to concede the point, but at the end of the day, I'm left with two considerations. It's never an especially good time to be the founder of a nonprofit arts organization that offers free programming and doesn't sell anything. And because right now is a particularly inopportune time for a variety of understandable reasons, in my opinion, it's never been more important or meaningful to do this work that we're doing. For those of you that are new to the game, welcome. I hope you'll stay around. I hope you'll help share the word. I hope you'll tell us to your friends about us, like us on all our social media platforms. Every little bit helps. And for those of you that are coming to us for the first time and saying, what is 1455? What does it mean? Let me talk to you about that a little bit. When I'm asked what 1455 is, in truth, there's a lot of ways to answer that question. 1455 is a nonprofit arts organization, and our mission is to celebrate creativity and build community. And we do that by showcasing and celebrating storytelling. That's what this festival is all about, and it's what all of our free programming does. By the way, what does 1455 signify? What does that name mean? I'm glad you asked. If you go to our website at 1455litarts.org, the origin story is all there. But in brief, 1455 is the year that Gutenberg's printing press, a innovation long in progress and owes, by the way, considerable props to innovations in China and other cultures. But Gutenberg's printing press began rolling out product in 1455. And in addition to being one of the reasons that we read books today, I like to think the symbolic import of that year is that was the first year that the idea of creating and disseminating content was finally and irrevocably taken out of the hands of the elites. And it set the tone for the centuries that followed, where art, news, journalism, essays, correspondence, basically any manner of storytelling no longer had to be passed through churches or politics. It was enabled by the common person to share with other common people. So we at 1455 celebrate that technology and the idea of this straight line going from centuries ago through today, where we now use technology to do what we did this weekend, which is a virtual festival. I think there's a very straight line going all the way back to 1455 to 2022. And it's the same impulse, which is to connect, to create, to share, to experience solidarity, and to build community through the written and spoken word and all the different art forms. I'm asked, so what's next for 1455? I'll say more of the same. We are very committed and dedicated to producing unbelievably diverse and inclusive content. We love putting on what has got to be one of the most diverse and amazing storytelling events in the world. We've gotten bigger and better every year, but I will say, without shame and without apology, we do need help. If you're able to support us, spread the word and get others to support us. If you know people with the means or are looking for a tax write-off, what better nonprofit than this? Everything we do is dedicated to our free programming. We want to make all of that free forever, and we want to continue putting on this content. So help us out if you can. But we're going to be here. The lights are on, and we plan to keep them on. 1455, how did it come about? Well, frankly, it's a dream I had and a conversation back in 2017 with one of my oldest friends, David, who willed this into existence by asking, I hear what you're thinking about. What would it take to make it happen? And I pulled in the kid that I met when I was 4, our mutual friend, Mark, who's now the executive chair of the 1455 board. And the three of us started playing in and outside the sandbox. And what you see today is a result of those discussions that took place over 5 years ago. And that story continues. So in closing, what I want to say is this. If you really want to know what 1455 is, check out the festival committee on our site, check out our board of directors. Those are the individuals who work ceaselessly to pull off miracle after miracle, make us look good, give the backbone, the nerve, the heart, the blood, the tissue, and the soul that goes into making this organization run, and help me, because without them, I'd be nothing. The idea may have initially been mine, but the realization of all that we do is, in every sense of the word, truly a team effort. Look at our YouTube page. As I mentioned, hundreds of videos at this point, which are now evergreen content. They're freely available to be enjoyed by anyone at any time. And I encourage you to check them out. See author interviews, see craft talks, see sessions from previous festivals, and share them widely. The more we do to lift up our storytelling community, the more we make this both a feasible and possibly perpetual endeavor. Look at the festival program and pay attention to all the speakers. Seek out their works, support our sisters organizations and journals and micro communities of all these writers and storytellers, all of whom are brilliant, passionate people whose work needs your attention and support. Lift them up, buy a few books, support our independent booksellers, support our independent cafes, and like I said, subscribe to some literary journals. And if you have the time or the inclination, support 1455. We need it, we want it, and we'll be better with your active and generous support. Last and not least, if you want to know what 1455 really is, look in the mirror. If you're a writer or anyone who appreciates storytelling, if you're here now, you're a welcome part of our community. I encourage you to be a vocal and visible part of that community. We want to support you. We want to showcase you. We want to celebrate you. We want to build community with you and all of your community. We want to nurture everyone who tells stories, and we want to nurture people who like to hear stories. That's all we're here to do, and we're going to keep doing it. All of this work would mean little if it wasn't well received. I'm grateful to everyone who's part of this story, and I couldn't be more optimistic about all the incredible ways this dream will continue to improve and expand. I thank you for being part of our 4th annual SummerFest. We'll be back next year. We'll see you. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back the day after that. And we look forward to continuing to bring this content and connecting with you. Be well, stay safe, and see you soon.